Lindsay, welcome to the basketball podcast.
Thanks, Chris. I love the just straight to the point. Anything with basketball in it, I'm in. So
I
this is
know.
awesome.
Let's frame it for coaches then. Obviously, doing a lot of stuff in the mental space, but a former player, played at Iowa State and played overseas. So just frame it for us a little bit how you got to here very quickly. And obviously, the basketball background will help all of our coaches relate to you.
Absolutely. Yes. Basketball is definitely in my blood. Lifelong love affair with the sport and sports in general. I just really believe in the transformational power of sports. And I know you do, and I know your listeners do as well. But really, I also believe that we end up leaving some kids behind in the sense of it is like this amazing opportunity, especially to teach life skills to youth. And sometimes people walk away with these amazing skills and sometimes maybe they don't. And I think the real difference in there is a lot of what you teach, which is like how to coach, right? And I have it very specific on the mental side. And really, I'm here because someone taught it to me. And I felt extremely fortunate. I had an amazing collegiate and professional career. And that was really because of the mental game. Obviously, you need a little bit of talent and you definitely need hard work. And I had those, but until I got the mental game, I was going really nowhere fast. And that really changed my life. And so I'm here paying it forward. And really, my whole career looked around. And of course, this is a while ago, but it's still this way. I looked around and was like, why are we not? People are talking about it now, but why is this not just a part of what we do, meaning the mental game, right? I saw a lot of people fall through the cracks. I saw a lot of talent not be utilized. And of course, that's the margin of error and the amount of people that kind of lose it mentally, it goes up as you get to the highest level. And I played at the highest level and I saw a lot of people without these pretty basic skills. I guess I'm biased because I do this every day, but we're not talking about extremely complicated skills and tools and things to practice.
So for me, what stands out is clearly how many players do we lose in the development process because they
Hmm.
don't control this variable?
Yep.
A lot.
Right.
And then even at the highest level, how many players don't reach a higher level because of this? So let's go to the simplest thing. And I love how you phrase this, obviously, and I've heard this in some context before, but I love your phrasing here. You mentioned that belief is a skill. So what steps can we do to be able to help them? If this is a skill, it means we can develop it instead of more games, we can spend more time on this stuff that can possibly make a bigger impact.
I love that you talked about this because I know we did some emails back and forth. But this morning I was like working out and I was like, what do I really want to talk to Chris about? And I think the thing that I've been thinking about this for 30 years. I've been an actual mental performance coach for a little over 20. And in the last few years, I've done a lot of work as far as like distilling things down. Now we have so much of this information. And I think to your point, a lot of coaches are like, okay, I get it. The mental game is important. What do I actually do? And I think one concept that I've really been teaching a lot to all my students, and my students are coaches, mental performance coaches, sometimes athletes still. And it's really this idea of when you look at elite athletes, you're talking about watching the Olympics last summer. You're talking about, again, people have talent, they have a work ethic. We know those things are important. But the thing that they really have to do that is so hard, and people don't necessarily verbalize it this way, is they have to keep belief alive. And in psychology terms, you might call this self-efficacy. But like the ability to believe that you are able to accomplish something. Because one thing we know about the brain is it doesn't want to waste energy and it doesn't want to move towards discomfort. So it's really always trying to be comfortable, always trying to be happy and just good, right? And safe. And so anytime you're pushing yourself, you're getting out of your comfort zone, which is really the antithesis of what the brain wants. And it's not going to do that unless it really believes that it is possible to accomplish the goal. And so as a coach, you're really looking at four different times that this belief is important. The first thing is we really have to, I should say, an athlete, for example, they're not going to even set a goal that they don't believe they can accomplish, right? So it's like the before. Then we have the ability to maintain that belief during the long stretch that it's going to take to accomplish that goal. And I think about like college morning conditioning. You're getting up at 5 a.m. If you don't believe that is going to pay off at some point, you're just not going to do it, right? And so keeping that belief alive when it takes longer than you think it's going to, frankly, And then you have the belief during failure, right? When like all the evidence, and we call this resilience, right? We look at the evidence in front of us. I just lost a game. I just missed a game-winning shot. We've lost 4 in a row. To keep the belief alive, and most people can't, right? This is why teams go downhill. This is why athletes quiet quit. To keep belief alive then is a skill. And then finally, to be able to believe under pressure. Those are the 4 times that what we call in our certification with my coaches, we call it belief work because it is something that you train. And we can talk about how you train it in a second. But that is the core of what I teach. And again, it's taken me a really long time to distill it down. So I hope that's helpful because I really think of this approach. A lot of times we throw around all these words like confidence and resilience and mental toughness and all this stuff. But really, when it comes down to it, is do we believe that we can accomplish the goal or not? Because if we don't, we're just not going to do the work, period. That's not how our brain is designed. It's called a waste of time or an energy.
I love the phrasing, keep belief alive, and just this practice of keeping it alive. And that's it. And young athletes, old athletes, we all deal with challenges. And that's a big part of this process. So, getting into it, what are some daily practices or what are some practices in the moment where we can help athletes be able to keep belief alive?
I'll start with some of the easy ones. One of them is like the social team and support, right? What's the famous quote of you're the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with? So I think like culture, and I know you teach a lot of this, like culture, team, support, that is really important. So making sure that's there because look, I train certified mindset coaches and when they are trying to keep their own individual belief alive that let's say they can build $100,000 business. If they look around and they see other people doing it that also believe in them and are supporting them, maybe when they have doubts, that's a huge benefit, right? Because there are going to be times and other people around you just hold that belief up when maybe you can't is really important. So I should say that's an easy one. It's not necessarily easy, but it is simple. The 2 things that we teach a lot are subconscious work. So I'm a trained hypnotist. So I teach a lot of hypnosis principles, but really anything like visualization, meditation, anything that's really getting into our deep limiting thoughts is going to be really great, important work. And then conscious thought work. So you can think of we have something called the TARE process. It's based in cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're really looking at your thoughts, again, your conscious thoughts. You can also say self-talk, but the things that you are telling yourself and being intentional about them. Again, we can be doing some journaling, we can do intentional self-talk routines, that sort of thing. And then the final piece to all this is your systems and routines. They always talk about falling to your systems. Like the more you can have these things baked into your everyday life, and we have a morning system that we teach and that sort of thing. But from a coaching standpoint, you can think about how do I keep belief alive with my players? And there's some overlapping pieces with this too, but you could do thought work or you could do visualization before practice, before every practice, for example. And once it's built in, I will say, Chris, did you brush your teeth this morning? I bet you did. Like everybody does routines. And in fact, it's a lot easier to remember to do them every day than it is to do it once in a while. And I think with this belief work and all the things that principles that we teach, one of the things that I really talk to coaches about is do little routines, add in little systems into your practices or your training sessions. Don't make them big and make them every day. It's going to take a big load off of trying to think through, well, what am I supposed to do on a Tuesday afternoon at practice? That's a lot of cognitive energy. And when you're able to keep belief alive, it's because these routines and systems are already built in.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little off script because you referenced what I do. So I'm very much a representative coach in the sense that we simulate the game every day in practice.
Mm.
So we don't do anything on air. We don't do anything where it's these traditional, I always succeed because there's no defense and it's rote
Yeah.
memorization, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
playing basketball to get better at basketball. So
Yeah.
one of the downfalls of that is that players are experiencing similar mindset training to the game. And I say downfall because they're experiencing a lot more struggles
Yep.
and they have to fight for their learning and they have to fight for their success. Now, it gives them more opportunities to learn how to cope, but I can see it in certain players that they are used to success because they
Hmm.
do on-air practice. And now all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they're playing the game all the time in practice and in games. How would you, in your world, be able to help a player in that mindset of being able to transfer what they learn in practice to the game?
What question are you asking exactly? What would I train during practice, or
The
what would I
practice
teach
to
us?
game transfer is what I'm trying to do with representative practice.
Okay.
Basketball transfers to basketball practice. Mental skills in practice transfer to mental skills in the game. And often we treat mental skills as a classroom session and then say, hey,
Mm.
go do it in
Okay,
front
you're
of
talking about
somebody
like
else.
on court stuff, right? Got it. So we teach something, we have a 6-step curriculum we call the mental game plan. And in the mental game plan is we teach it about how the brain works. We teach about these pretty universal skill sets, which is visualization and cognitive behavioral thought process, which is the TARE process. That aside, one of the simplest things that you can implement is what we call the athlete toolbox. This is pre-practice, pre-game, in-game, and post-game. Those are like the big mental buckets, if you will. Okay. So pre-practice, we teach something called the Braver, but essentially, and the Braver is an acronym for many of the tools that we teach into one 5-minute routine. People can learn more about that on our website if they want to implement that. But essentially, what you're doing is you're creating, and again, you can use ours or you can create your own, a mental warm up. Okay. So many people, you've been in this world a long time. 30 years ago, we weren't doing a dynamic warm up. Now everybody does it. 50 years ago, people weren't lifting weights. Now everybody does it, right? And the thought that athletes can just switch from whatever's going on into their life into practice time or game time is ludicrous, right? Now, some people do on certain days. Some people are better at it than others. But to have a real routine where it's, I am getting my mind warmed up to play. I believe that this work I'm about to do is connected to the goals that I say that I want through visualization. You're going to practice better. You're going to be more present. You're going to be more connected to your goals. So that is really important. Pre-practice.
Is a mental warm up, is just before you keep going, is a
Yeah,
mental warm up something that they do on their own,
it's a good
in their own
question.
space?
Yep.
What is this?
It depends. Like I went and worked with an SCC team like a few months ago, and I definitely taught it to the team to do in their huddle with the coaches. One of the assistants ran them through it. But certainly, if you have people coming at different times, or you're training and people are coming at different times, it's certainly something that people can do on their own. Now, we have it guided if people wanted to like put it on their phone and while they're listening to it as they're putting their shoes on. You could do it that way as well. But I do think for a lot of teams, I think it is really nice to do it together because it's showing the importance of it. It's not singling anybody out, especially if the coaches are doing it. You get that cultural change of this is freaking important. This is something that you struggle with, I struggle with, the person next to you struggles with. And it's important that we get ahead of it because we're all going to have ups and downs. That's what we're here for. And so that message I think is really important also, but it certainly depends on the logistics of what you're doing.
I love the idea. Again, you referenced dynamic warm up. People have dribbling routines, they have different routines
Yeah.
like that. So it just makes sense and that
Yep.
connects.
Yeah.
You mentioned the braver technique, which I looked into and researched a little bit. And I guess the question that comes out of that is that maybe for coaches, because coaches spend a lot of time telling people what they do wrong. Why is it important to be able to affirm positive beliefs, not just from a coach to a player, but a player to themselves as a
Yeah.
game changer for maintaining the right mindset?
That's a great question. So, what we know about the brain is from a survival standpoint, we overemphasize negativity, right? From a survival standpoint, we have to pay more attention to things that are bad. Like that's just how it goes, right? And so the brain already has this negativity bias. And so, in any psychology research, what you'll see, whether it's relationships, marriage, or coaching, you'll see that really to offset that bias, we need to say 7 positive things to every 1 negative thing. You'll see research with some a little bit higher than that, some a little bit lower than that. People go way up sometimes. But even if you're talking about, let's even say 1 to 2, you have to say 2 positive things to every 1 negative thing. That takes intention, right? And a lot of not only are we all pre-programmed to pay more attention to negativity? But our brains, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts in our brain every day. A lot of times that's rumination. A lot of times that's repeating the negative. And so, again, to offset that, we really have to be intentional about the positive. Now, I am a basketball player. I played at a really high level. You are not going to hear me say that you can't say negative things, that winning doesn't matter. I will say you can know like a real baller if you go up to them after the game and you say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Good try. Doesn't matter." That's not what we're doing here. It's not toxic positivity, but it is the ability to remove some of the shame and the over negativity and just be neutral. I don't know if you've heard like the neutral thinking type mindset. So it's not like we have to go, oh my God, everything's great. I'm the best player in the world. And I just screwed up 10 times in a row and that's okay. It's not that. It's just more the ability to say, okay, I need to pull my elbow and I need to use my legs more. I didn't get my feet set on that one, right? It's not a criticism. It's not a shame. It's not a blame. It's just information. But that being said, we do, in my opinion, have to err on the side of more positivity and encouragement because once we believe that our goal's not going to work out, our brain is designed to go back in the cave. That is how it's designed. So the minute we think, I can't do this, can't be done, it's not going to work out for me, we start conserving energy and we don't want to put ourselves out there again.
I love the practicality of this because to me, whether 2 to 1, 5 to 1, 7 to 1, what you're saying is there's an
Right.
imbalance.
Yeah.
There's an imbalance, and we have to balance it out, and the athlete has to balance it out in particular. And I love that because that just gives a practical thing to be able
Hmm.
to focus on. So then in these moments, so in a moment when an athlete is struggling, experiencing some struggle, what are some things that we can do as a coach to help them reset or some things that they can do to reset? We always talk
Yeah.
about playing present, parking,
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
different coping strategies, but what does Lindsay say?
Can I say one more thing about just a really practical thing about
Always.
negative? I want to get to your question real quick, but I just had this thought of one of the most powerful exercises. I know your coaches probably love little exercises. One of the most powerful exercises that I teach when I go into working with a team is really the example of how the negative biases works in our own brain. Okay. So what I have people do is I have them write down 3 to 5 negative things that they say. And I might have them imagine. Let's say you just missed 3 shots in a row. Let's imagine that you're down by 20. Let's imagine that you just got benched, whatever the situation is, right? What are 3 to 5 things that you might say to yourself in your brain and have them write it down when that happens? Okay. I'm going to have them look at it and then I'm going to have them partner up and I'm going to have them say it with the other person's name. I would write mine down and I'd say, Chris. And then I would say the things that I said to myself. I would say, Chris, you're the worst basketball player in the world. Chris, you should not be on this team. You are not good enough to be on this team. Chris, whatever the next negative thing was, right? You're never going to get to the next level. This is crazy. Whatever the negative thing is, I say it to you with your name and I say it out loud. That exercise is probably one of the best, and it takes 10 minutes, right? It's probably one of the best exercises to really give people a practical view of how negative it is and how unhelpful it is. I would never say that to Chris. And yet I'm saying it to myself over and over again. And again, it doesn't mean I just have to say, Chris, you're the best basketball player in the world, but is saying that you're the worst in the world helpful in that moment? Which brings us to, okay, what do you do next? I
Well,
just
let's
got,
stay there. If we can stay there
yeah.
for 1 second, because you came down, and I'm so grateful you went here. Is that a pre-practice, post-practice? Where's the best time to be able to fit that
I like
in?
that. I like that as a post
Okay.
practice, but you could do it. I don't think it really matters, but I would keep it short and sweet. And just an example, it's just a quick because so much of this is like self awareness. Here's one of the principles of all this. We probably should have said this in the beginning, but one of the principles of almost everything that I do is the thoughts that we have. And this is really where we're coming from a training standpoint. We think our thoughts are facts. We just do. Real world examples is you're overwhelmed and you think you don't have enough time to do everything in your day. That feels like an absolute fact. If anybody's had a busy day, that feels like the biggest truth fact. It's like on a billboard for your day. You do not have enough time to do the things that you need to do today. And yet that's not actual fact. It is a thought about your day. And that space sounds really insignificant, but what it does is when you realize that your thoughts are not facts, you then start to one, question their validity, and two, it opens your brain up to finding creative solutions. So I might say, I feel like I have too much to do today. What can I do? Can I ask for help? Can I take something off my plate? Can I ask for a favor? Can I put something off till tomorrow? Versus there is nothing I can do because the fact of the matter is I have too much to do today. How motivating is that? Not very. If you're like me, you'll probably then start procrastinating or spinning or trying to figure out what to do next. And it's because we thought that thought was a fact. So getting that space and self-awareness that your thoughts are not facts is, it sounds really simple. It is a huge skill and one that it can be really beneficial to athletes.
Nailed that. I love that. Coaches, again, very practical stuff. The little assignment to do post practice, brilliant. Do it, coaches. And then this just thing right there, like I can already see myself telling so many players that your thought is not a fact.
Yeah.
Maybe then, if you're okay, jump to the moment now.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So let's take that. You just got pulled out of the game because you missed four. Or I can tell you, I got a great example. I played for Bill Fenley at Iowa State University. I was just back a couple weeks ago for our 25th reunion of the Big 12 championship. Okay. And they were playing on Instagram, which is hilarious because I played so long ago that there's no footage, right? And so they're playing like this game when we played at Texas to secure the regular season Big 12 championship. Or yeah. So we played at Texas. It was my freshman year. They're playing like the last couple minutes and I was playing great, right? I was just like balling out. I was a freshman. It was like my breakthrough game. I think I had 19 points. I don't know why I remember that because I don't usually remember, but I do remember this because we were laughing about it because they're like, you played great. And I was like, listen, the first half, I was a freshman, mind you. The first half, I had 5 turnovers. We're on the road at Texas with Edwina Brown, and I had 5 turnovers in the first half. I think I blacked out at halftime. I was so terrible. I was not even sure I was going to get in the second half. Okay. Imagine you have 5 turnovers, you get pulled out of the game, you're a freshman, whatever. And again, your brain is going what I call in the negative train. And there's no high fives that's going to make it better. There's no pat on the back from my teammates whispering that it's going to be okay. There's nothing in that moment unless you have trained for it. And this is where what we call a reset ritual or a mistake ritual can be so important. Now, parents see this too, coaches see this, where athletes can't recover from one bad shot or a couple missed turnovers or whatever, that they know their athlete is going to spiral, right? And they are off to the races and like they're gone. And everybody wants to know what to do in that moment. And what I always say is it's like trying to get in better shape in the middle of the game. It's too late, okay? The good news is that you can get in better shape ahead of time. And you're going to do that with what we call a reset ritual. And so essentially what we teach is really simple. The goal in that moment is to anchor an athlete and train themselves for these moments. And the nice thing is, similar to what you're experiencing, you are training your athletes through failure in real time in practice. So they're going to get a lot of opportunities to reset in the moments. I always say after drills, water breaks, it's not just mistakes. It's just anytime you're able to reset. And we have them take a deep breath. We have them do a hand motion. Now, not every sport you can do this, but in basketball you can. And we have them have a reset word or phrase. And this is, again, decided ahead of time. So you can have your athletes decide. The way that I usually teach it is like they could do an animal, they could do their favorite player. They could say, let's say their favorite player is Diana Taurasi, right? She just retired, so she's on my mind. You could say DT mindset. You could say tiger. A lot of younger kids like choosing an animal. But it could also be a word or a phrase that sort of evokes your best mindset. So when you're thinking about, usually what I have athletes do is I say, okay, think of your 5 best games. What do you remember about how that felt? What words come to mind? What did you experience? And they might just like jot a bunch of things down. And they'll probably say things like confident or unstoppable. If they're a little older, maybe they'll use different words like flow or not thinking, things like that. And so you're going to want them to choose a word or a phrase, and then they have to practice it. So again, it's a hand motion. Hand motion doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what the word is to either. This is the thing. I think a lot of people want to have a magic thing, and it's really about training it. So it does start feeling like magic, but only because you've trained it. So it's a deep breath, it's a word or phrase, and it's a hand signal. And this really anchors the body in that moment. And essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to stop your brain from taking off. You're trying to get it to this moment. Right here is the only moment that matters. And I have something to do. Because given nothing to do, it's going to get on the negative train. And that's neural pathways. That's been practiced so much in the past. And in some ways, it's been encouraged. The like getting mad at yourself, the pouting, the being competitive, having some sort of reaction to missing a shot or not playing well. In many ways, we've been taught that means you're a competitor. And so that has to be untrained too. That means you care. You're throwing water balls, that means you care. And so that has to be untrained and trained in this. Again, this doesn't mean that you have to say, I'm the best basketball player in the world. This is great. It's not lying to yourself, but having an anchor in that moment with a reset ritual is, I think, one of the most valuable things.
I love it. And you just talked about the contradiction between let it happen and make it happen, which
Mm-hmm.
are this Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy
Yep.
mindset of kind of both are important.
Yep.
And then you have to balance it and it comes back to that. And I love that. Love the practicality of that as well. Just being able to give them something in terms of a strategy. In your experience, and I imagine, yes, but it's more than just belief, right? There's a gap between good and great, and it's not just a purely skill and belief. What are some of the other factors from a mental standpoint that go into the difference between good and great or okay and good?
So much of it has to do with emotional regulation. And I do think a lot of that is rooted in belief because fight or flight really gets activated when you don't believe that what you're doing is going to work out. So I do think that's foundational. But our ability to emotionally regulate and deal with the ups and downs of sports is really fundamental. I always, when I'm talking to a collegiate athlete or professional even, I think one of the things that's important to acknowledge, and even really high school, to be honest, things are getting really serious at a really young age. I think acknowledging that, yes, people on the external, let's say, as a college athlete, people on the external understood that I had 5:30 a.m. conditioning. They understood there was travel. They understood it was the time management piece. They understood and I had to have nice, good nutrition and enough sleep. That is obvious that you have to work really hard and hopefully you have some talent to work with also. But I think what is often just not acknowledged, except for those of us that have been at that level, is the psychological stress of keeping yourself up, if you will. And again, a lot of this is rooted in belief, but it is a job. It is a job to keep yourself psychologically up because you can show up, especially back in the day, like our scholarships were very dependent on us showing up to 5:30 a.m. conditioning, right? You can force yourself to do it, but to do it in a way that is pushing yourself all the time, even when it looks like it's not going to work out. Even my senior year, when we lost practically every game, do you show up every day, even when you don't want to, and push yourself? There is a huge psychological stress, and it's a good thing because it ends up making you a very resilient individual, but it is massively uncomfortable. It takes a lot of work, a lot of work. And I think that's the piece that people really need to acknowledge and recognize that it can be trained. And that's why people need so much support. And I think talking about it is really helpful because when people crack under that, they never think, oh, it's because this is a lot. They think it's because there's something wrong with them. And everybody struggles with the psychological stress. Because the higher up you go from potentially being the best on your team to potentially being the worst, and then every day fighting your way up. That is really hard to do. It's really hard to do. And that is, it's hard because it's hard. And I think talking about it is really important and almost honoring the process, because not everybody's going to be Diana Taurasi. But if you can show up every day and be present in practice and push yourself to another, the battle is really with yourself. And honoring that is such a beautiful thing. And that's available to everybody. And that's why I'm passionate about this work. It's probably why you're passionate about this work, is because of who that these young people get to become through the struggle.
I think we both agree that like we love this in part because we do feel that like, it's not fixed states, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can influence, we can impact, and we can make change, and I love that part of it. And it reminded me, I had some notes, I had to check back through them, but one thing I wrote down from what you said before is, and you've said it here, is teach them how to manage their own mind. And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes that's just as simple as getting them to move it from unconscious to conscious, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to bring it to their conscious mind because they don't actually know what they're saying to themselves sometimes.
Yep. Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
we
And
feel it as their parent or as their coach, right?
absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and that's challenging for sure, but again, so much of it is rooted in self-awareness, and there's also just like the human aspect of this. I think one of the principles that we teach in our certification is, as coaches, when we are practicing this stuff as adults, I talked about as entrepreneurs, as parents, that we are growing and pushing and managing our own thoughts in whatever game, so to speak, that we're playing right now, and failing and managing that and talking about it and honoring the process over the results. Even as athletes, we are really chasing results, right? And being able to manage that as people that are driven and have high goals and high expectations for ourselves. That is the game within the game that none of us will ever master, and all of us should be on the journey to improve.
You referenced a few different things here that are like stereotypes or cliches to coaching, like pushing them hard and all creating all these environments that kind of could be negative to a player.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that you've shared, and I did a deep dive through your Instagram, some ideas about how to present kind of some of the positive mindset stuff to a player. And one of those things was a simple phrasing of saying, one of my favorite things about you is.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to say that, and I say to coaches all the time, find some things that you can normalize and notice about a player every day.
Yeah, I
And
love
this
that.
is a great phrasing. You just brought something very practical to life for me.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I did a 5 phrases that will improve your coaching. I think I coach my 9-year-old daughter, and I have so much respect for coaches. It is really a challenging profession or side hustle as I'm doing it right now. But I do think that so much of it is the intention of, again, the game within the game that we're all playing, whether we're doing it through a sport or in our business, that balance between, and I think this is a challenge for us individually and from a coaching standpoint, is like the balance between pushing and being driven and doing that in a positive way. Not to get too micro, but I think as a mental performance coach, as a professional athlete, and as a mental performance coach, I love when I get to work with all levels of athletes, but I think there's something really amazing when you get to a little bit of a higher level. You and many adults will recognize this in themselves also, I think, is you get to a level and you say, okay, I got to this level. And for me, that was a professional level. I got to this level because I was ridiculously hard on myself. I was like, just punished myself in some ways, right? Whether that was punishing myself physically or mentally or emotionally. And there's a positive in that. You will never hear me say that we should just be quote unquote nice all the time, right? And even to ourselves. But that being said, that is you will, and I don't think you'll ever reach an athlete or meet an athlete that's at a really high level unless they're just crazy talented, maybe, that doesn't have a little bit of that. And they will reach a level where that doesn't work anymore. And what they do from there, that's one of the funnest things as a mental performance coach, is helping them take that, the good parts of being hard on themselves, and turning it into boosting themselves up with love and toughness and maintaining standards and being excellent and not with that heaviness of nothing's ever good enough. And I think that's lessons as coaches that are really important. And by the way, if you're not practicing this for yourself, it's really hard to teach for other people because you'll just project it. So keeping the good of being hard on yourself and then morphing that into doing it with love, that's the whole game right there.
Yeah, practicing what you preach. I know you've said that a few times through some
Yeah.
of the stuff I read, and that makes sense. That brings it home for me. I want to go. You mentioned Diana Taurasi. You mentioned being a very competitive person who
Hmm.
drove herself, and then you mentioned obviously being a parent.
Yeah.
Can we, in fact, help kids, players be more competitive? Because that competitive intensity, that competitive mindset is really something that I get asked about a lot. How do I help my players be more competitive? It's not a
Yeah.
drill, right? It's more than
Yeah.
that. So can you help us
Yeah.
shed some
Oh,
light?
it's really challenging. I really do think that is there. I don't think there's any secret sauce. I just don't. And I do think that there are some athletes that are more competitive, whether that's nature or nurture. I don't know. Maybe both, probably both. But I do think that there are some really fundamental things that you can do that create the environment for more competition. And I would say a couple things. I say one, the psychological safety that now some people get that sort of automatically. And again, I think that's nature versus nurture. They just don't care. They just don't care whether you like them. They don't care whether they're pleasing you. They just want to win. But then there's I think some people that maybe just really aren't that competitive. Like they just don't have that drive. I think there's a lot of people in the middle. Okay. So I think that for those people in the middle, and I'm not saying those other people aren't able to be more competitive, but I think when you're talking about the people in the middle, there are some things that you can do that really awaken. In other words, like they can be competitive or not competitive depending on the environment. I think psychological safety is really important. I think especially with young women, the ability to teach them to be aggressive, that they don't have to be liked in every situation, a culture of it's okay to be aggressive. I think that's one piece. I think that the psychological safety of failing, of it's okay, it's part of the process. I think that's super important as well. And with that, I think being able to talk about failure, celebrate failure, recognize it as a piece of growth. And then ultimately, what we talked about, bring it back to the beginning. People are not going to go full bore for their goals, whatever that goal is, if they don't believe it's going to work out. We just are not designed that way. So I think in that space, those pieces are creating an environment where more people are going to feel comfortable being aggressive.
And you referenced it. Some things can come out naturally, certainly right, based on nurture and the environment. But I know this for my young daughters' teams. When they were young, I had to teach the players that they were allowed to take the ball from the other team. Like things like
Absolutely.
that, we
Yep.
assume they know.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, nobody told them
Yep.
by the time they got to me that they were allowed
Hmm.
to go rip a rebound from someone's hands
Yep.
or go these
Yep.
different things. And that just
Yep.
helps them hopefully in a mindset of being more competitive.
Yeah. I was like, I have four daughters, 9, almost 7, 5, and 2.5. And they're all competitive in certain situations with each other. They're very aggressive. They have that. And when I'm coaching girls in particular, and boys too, I've heard this from other people in my family with their boys, because in school and any sort of social situation, they're taught, and boys too, they're taught to behave. They're taught to share. They're taught to be kind. And this is great, right? The social emotional learning that teachers are doing, I bow down to my kids' teachers because it is so next level. And that can kind of, it's not, the antithesis is not competition and sports, but it can feel like it in the moment. You can say, I'm taught to share, and then I'm supposed to take the ball away from somebody. I'm just taught to be kind, but then I'm supposed to rip the ball away from them as they fall on the ground and go shoot. Right. And so teaching them that being a good sport and also wanting to rip the ball out of somebody's hand, I do believe that has to be taught and celebrated in a way that can be surprising for some of us that maybe are a little bit older and forgot that maybe at some point in our life we didn't know that.
Absolutely. And I love that example as well. And another thing that I know is common, especially you talk about youth sport, is like understanding, and somewhere along the line we've lost this, that like criticism versus criticizing, this kind of mindset of kind of being able to tell someone that they can do something better doesn't mean I'm telling them that they're bad. Like it's
Yeah.
you can do something better means that you can get better and you're already maybe okay at something or good at something. And this struggle
Yeah.
in communication.
Okay, so one of the principles, this brings us back to the athlete toolbox. So I talked about pre-practice. We didn't talk about pre-game, but maybe another time. We talked about in-competition reset rituals, and now we're talking about post-competition. And I should say post-competition or post-practice. And essentially what we're talking about is an evaluation. For myself, I was, again, ridiculously hard on myself, which essentially made me not want to look at myself, right? In college, I would go sort of reluctantly because my wanting to be good outweighed my fear, but I would like trudge into my coach's office reluctantly, but again, I would do it and watch game film and just like nails on a chalkboard the entire time because I was like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And blah, 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 right? And I was so emotional about it. I really wanted to just put my head in the sand and just never look at game film, right? And a lot of athletes post competition will do the head in the sand. And what they do often is, and this is after practice or really any kind of situation where you're being judged, they either feel good because it went well or they feel terrible because it didn't. And neither one of those extremes is particularly useful because it's usually both. No one plays perfect and no one plays terrible. Or if they do, there's at least something they can find that they did well. Okay. So what we teach is something called critiquing versus criticizing. And this is definitely an exercise. This is definitely a practice, I should say. That's not something that someone's just going to get the concept and be fine. It's the balance of being able to look at yourself or hear feedback from someone else in a way that is not emotional. And again, this takes practice because it is hard, even for adults, even pretty much for all of us. And by the way, this is what I teach my mental performance coaching students who are building their own businesses is how do you do this like after a podcast interview or after a sales call or after you speak and you're doing a workshop, are you able to evaluate and critique what happened and not criticize so that you can learn? So you can say what went well, what didn't go, what can I do better next time? Otherwise, all of that information is lost to emotion because it just flies away. You don't learn anything. And so that's what we teach.
So for me, we're wrapping up here, but I want to make sure that we connect a few things and particularly related to your business, because I think it's important what you're doing. I remember being in school, and you can probably get by my questions that I'm obsessed with practical. And like
I am
Bloom's
too.
taxonomy of learning, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sure,
Yep.
I can learn all that. I know what they
Yep.
are. But
Yep.
to me, what
Yep.
does that mean? And that's what you've done with your business is that you've
Mm-hmm.
tried to create something very practical for people. So I just want you to highlight that a little bit for anyone out there that's interested in learning more about the way and your methods.
Yeah, thanks for the platform on that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so my business, my original business when I started 20 years ago was like athletes need to learn this information, right? And as I've gone through, and that was before anybody really knew what mental performance training was. It started changing about 10 years ago. Athletes started talking about it, and then COVID obviously changed a lot. And now we're at the place where there's a huge collective understanding that this is important. You don't have to spend a lot of time convincing people anymore. But now we've gone to the other side where the problem is almost too much information in the sense that, like, coaches are like, yes, I need to do this. Oh my God, where do I even start? And again, practically, what do I do on a Tuesday afternoon at practice? And then they get often paralyzed, overwhelmed, and put it off till next season. So, what we've created, and also there is a huge need for mental performance coaches. So, the amount of money in high school and collegiate sports is like massive. People are spending so much on skill training and shoes and equipment and on travel and all the things, and that's fine. But one of the ways to get out of sports what we all want is mental performance training. And the world really needs more of us A lot of people, there's a huge market for it. A lot of parents in particular and coaches are looking for people to help them. And so I essentially looked around 10 years ago and was like, there's not enough of us. And I started training and certifying other mental performance coaches. I also have this curriculum that I teach, which is called the Mental Game Plan. And essentially, I think of myself as one, I am an action person. I just am. And also the curation of all of this information into very practical, simple things that work is like my jam. I was a collegiate and professional athlete, and really everything I teach is has been like, okay, here's all the stuff, the theory, the research, blah, blah, blah. What actually works? If you're a player, what actually works? And distilled that down into a system that's really easy to teach. We coach coaches to teach it to their team and learn it themselves. That's the mental game plan. And then we have our 4-month certification for coaches that want to have a business as a mental performance coach. So there's really two options. There's certification, which is 4 months. And then we have something, like I said, called the mental game plan, which is really coaches that don't want to have a business at it, but want to learn a curated curriculum. Which is, I always think of it as like everything you need and nothing that you don't, so that people can just get right into it. Everybody thinks that mental game problems are so unique and need to be so customized. And at the higher level, yes, but most athletes, I would say 90% of athletes need a foundational program to learn much of what we talked about today. When they have that, and most don't, right? When they have that, then we can start customizing it. But a core foundational curriculum is really important.
I love it. One-stop shopping. And that's exactly what the basketball immersion community is, to try and make sense of
Yeah.
constraints-led approach, ecological dynamics, games approach, whatever you want to call it, and make
Yeah,
it practical
cool.
and simple to apply. So I really
Yeah.
connect with it, Lindsay, what you shared there.
Yeah.
Lindsay, this has been phenomenal. I love it from a practical standpoint and everything else. And I know coaches are going to want to reach out and find out more information. So let us know where we can find more information on what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. I'm on Instagram, Lindsay at Lindsay Positive Perform. That's a great way to get a hold of me and just learn more about what we do. I have my own podcast too, the Mindset Coach Academy podcast, which really talks about how to start your own mental performance coaching business and some coaching on how to coach mental performance also. Let's see. And then I have a free ebook for any of your coaches, again, that are interested in having a business as a mental performance coach, or combining it with a skill-based business, or really taking their coaching to the next level and having some paid clients as a mental performance coach. We have a free ebook called How to Become a Mental Performance Coach, and that's without your sports psychology degree. I don't have my degree. I really believe that there is a line between mental health and mental performance, and I teach mental performance. And I am sure that a lot of coaches in your community are really high level coaches and might also be doing this stuff on their own without knowing it or without charging for it. And we really help people take it to the next level so that they can have a business and take it really seriously so that they can help more people.
So much great stuff you shared. Thank you so much for sharing the game with us.
Oh, thanks, Chris, for having me. I really appreciate your work as well.